late August 1994. The corner of Maxwell and Halsted on the near west side of Chicago. It's a Sunday morning. A team of city workers and University of Illinois at Chicago administrators is helping clear the last vendors off the pavement. 80-year-old men are folding metal tables that hold cassette tapes, used tools, second-hand radios, a Pentecostal preacher's sound system. A blues guitarist who has played this exact corner since the late 1940s is loading his amplifier into the trunk of a Buick. He's the last live performer on Maxwell Street. There won't be a next one. The market on that stretch of pavement had run continuously since 1871. 123 years of uninterrupted commerce. It survived 2 world wars. It survived the Great Depression and the introduction of suburban supermarkets and the rise of electric refrigeration and the entire post-war movement of working-class Chicagoans out to the suburbs. What it did not survive was the University of Illinois at Chicago's South Campus expansion plan, which was approved by the Chicago City Council, signed off on by the federal government, and executed in approximately 6 bureaucratic months. Maxwell Street wasn't murdered. Maxwell Street was administered, and Maxwell Street is the rule, not the exception. The real story of modern Chicago is not the story of a city that lost its historic neighborhoods. It's the story of a city that erased its historic neighborhoods on purpose in 3 distinct historical waves by 3 distinct mechanisms, with 3 distinct sets of fingerprints on the levers. Most people walking down Halsted today have no idea any of it happened because the addresses are still there. Halsted is still called Halsted. The streets remember nothing. Let me walk you through the 3 waves. The first wave was federal money. In 1949, Congress passed the Housing Act, which handed cities billions of dollars to do what was officially called slum clearance and what every honest historian now calls urban renewal. Chicago took that money with both hands. The man pulling the levers was Mayor Richard J. Daley, who took office in 1955 and stayed there for 21 years. In those 21 years, his administration physically demolished more square miles of inhabited Chicago than any administration in any American city before or since. A few specific examples because the abstractions hide the violence. Greektown. The original Chicago Greektown was on Halsted Street between Harrison and Polk. 8 square blocks of bakeries, butcher shops, Greek Orthodox churches, and 3 flat apartment buildings populated by tens of thousands of Greek immigrants who had been there since the 1890s. In 1955, the city began construction of what was then called the Congress Expressway, eventually renamed the Eisenhower, which sliced directly through the middle of that neighborhood. Almost half of historic Greektown was gone before the freeway opened in 1961. The other half was taken in 1965 when the brand new University of Illinois at Chicago built its campus on top of it. Today's Greektown, on Halsted near Madison, is the 3rd Greektown. The small remnant of a small remnant. It exists because 3 blocks of restaurants happen to survive. The rest is parking lots and a state university. Black Belt. The Black Belt was the strip of Chicago neighborhoods, running from 22nd Street South to roughly 67th, where almost all black Chicagoans were forced to live by racial covenants and bank redlining between 1910 and 1948. By the 1940s, the Black Belt was the densest and most economically active black community in the entire United States. The Chicago Defender was published there. The Regal Theater hosted Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Cab Calloway every other weekend. Provident Hospital on the south end of the Strip was the first black-owned hospital in the country. In 1962, the city of Chicago rammed the Dayan-Ryan Expressway directly through the western edge of the Black Belt, displacing thousands of families. The engineering route, the route the highway engineers had originally drawn, ran through white neighborhoods on the south side. Daley's office redrew the path personally to spare them. There are city council documents that prove this happened. Cabrini Green. The plot of land where the Cabrini Green high-rises eventually stood was originally Little Sicily, also known as Little Hell, a dense Sicilian immigrant district on the near north side. In the 1940s, the Chicago Housing Authority demolished Little Sicily to build the Francis Cabrini row houses. The high-rise towers came later. By 1962, about 15,000 people lived in the full Cabrini Green complex. The Italian neighborhood that had existed there before, with its bakeries and its saint processions and its specific Sicilian dialect, was completely gone. Then, between 1995 and 2011, Cabrini Green itself was demolished. Two neighborhoods on the same plot of land, both erased by separate Chicago administrations 60 years apart. The land is now mixed-income housing for residents from a completely different income bracket. That was the bulldozer, federal money in one hand, expressway maps in the other. The second wave was the opposite of the first. The first wave demolished neighborhoods on purpose. The second wave simply stopped maintaining them on purpose. Between 1950 and 1990, the city of Chicago lost over 600,000 residents. The standard explanation is the suburbs, and the suburbs did absorb a lot of those people. But the deeper movement was out of the city entirely. White working-class families left for Naperville, Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates, Orland Park. The federally insured mortgages that financed those moves were systematically denied to black families. That is the textbook definition of redlining, and a series of federal investigations confirmed it retroactively, starting in 1975. Meanwhile, the industrial economy that had built Chicago disappeared, mostly in a 15-year window. The Union Stockyards, which had been the largest meat processing complex in the world and the literal economic engine of working-class Chicago for over a century, closed in 1971. 40,000 jobs gone in roughly 3 years. Wisconsin Steel, on the far south side, closed in 1980. 3,500 workers showed up at the plant for their shifts and were told the plant was permanently locked. No severance, no warning. The gates were already physically chained shut. U.S. Steel Southworks, the largest steel mill in Chicago, closed in 1992. 20,000 jobs at its peak. The site is still mostly empty lakefront acreage today, more than 30 years later, waiting for somebody to figure out what to do with it. Neighborhoods like Roseland, Pullman, South Chicago, parts of Englewood, large pieces of Bronzeville were not bulldozed. They were left in place and slowly starved. Banks pulled out, grocery stores pulled out, drug stores, schools. By 1990, parts of South Chicago had vacant lots between every other building. Not because the buildings had burned down, because nobody was investing in the people who lived there, and the people themselves had nowhere obvious to invest. That was the bank. No villain in a hard hat, just nobody answering the phone. The third wave is happening right now on the same streets you can walk down today. It looks completely different from the first two. There are no bulldozers. There are no boarded-up storefronts. There is espresso. There is exposed brick. There are new condo buildings with bike storage and rooftop decks. This wave is gentrification, and it has been hitting Chicago seriously since roughly the year 2000. The pattern is consistent across neighborhoods. A working-class neighborhood with good housing stock and reasonable train access starts attracting artists and recent college graduates who pay low rents because the rents are low. Investors notice the artists. Developers buy the buildings. Rents climb. The original residents, often Latino, working-class Black, or white ethnic, are priced out and leave. A decade later, the neighborhood is unrecognizable. The buildings are exactly the same. The signage is in English instead of Spanish or Polish. The corner store sells local IPA beers instead of 40-ounce malt liquors. The taqueria becomes a poke bowl place. Wicker Park went through this in the 1990s. Logan Square went through it in the 2010s. Pilsen, the historically Mexican neighborhood on the Lower West Side, is going through it right now. From 2000 to 2020, Pilsen lost more than 10,000 Latino residents. The buildings are still there. The murals on 18th Street are mostly still there. But the bodegas have become wine bars, and the bakeries have become coffee roasters, and the people who built the neighborhood over 50 years are increasingly priced out into the southwest suburbs of Cicero and Berwyn. The accelerant for the third wave has a boring technocratic name: tax increment financing, TIF districts. When a Chicago neighborhood gets designated as a TIF, all future growth in property tax revenue gets diverted into a slush fund the city can spend on private development incentives. The official idea, when the Illinois law that created the program was passed in 1977, was to fight blight. In practice, TIF money in Chicago has overwhelmingly gone to already wealthy or rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods to subsidize even more development. Independent city audits have shown that TIF districts in Chicago have moved billions of dollars away from public schools and into already gentrifying areas. That was the cappuccino. Polished, branded, perfectly legal, and just as effective as a wrecking ball at making a neighborhood unrecognizable to the people who grew up in it. Three waves: the bulldozer, the bank, the cappuccino. They look like three completely different stories. They feel like three completely different stories. The villains are different. The politics are different. The decade is different. But step back 10,000 feet, and the result is identical. A neighborhood that existed, with its bakeries and its dialects and its grandmothers and its specific way of being itself, gets replaced by something that has the same street name and almost nothing else in common. This is the part most Chicago histories miss. They tell you about Wave 1, or about Wave 2, or about Wave 3. They almost never tell you that the three waves are the same story, repeated 3 times in the same century, on the same streets, in the same city. A neighborhood is not the buildings. A neighborhood is not even the addresses. A neighborhood is the agreement between several thousand people to share a specific corner of the world long enough that the corner takes on a personality. When you break that agreement by any method, the corner reverts to being just a corner. Cities that lose neighborhoods by accident are unlucky. Chicago lost its neighborhoods on purpose, 3 different ways for 3 different reasons, and the only thing the 3 waves have in common is that the people who made the decisions never had to live in the neighborhoods that paid for them. That's the whole story. We didn't lose our neighborhoods. We made them disappear, and the bulldozer, in retrospect, was the most honest of the 3 weapons we used to do it.